Hey everyone, Genome here, coming to you with the next episode of Was It Good? I am continuing my saga in the hack and or slash section of Was It Good, where I'm taking a look back at some of the, I don't know, more popular like horror slasher flicks from my youth, and what better way to start than with the Friday the 13th series. So if you've been following along so far, I reviewed the first 5, and had a little bit of a mixed bag here in terms of quality, but so far I've enjoyed every one of them. You know, a lot of times when you go back and review something that you loved in your youth or in the distant past, and when I say distant past, I haven't seen a lot of these movies in over a quarter of a century. So, you know, you tend to sometimes kind of put stuff up on a pedestal that maybe it didn't deserve to be. But I'm finding myself pleasantly surprised by some of these movies. Now, granted, they are pretty tame compared to today's fare. I mean, you find more horrifying stuff on television nowadays than you did back then. Unfortunately, the MPA had a field day with this series, probably more than any other there was out there. So, but that's neither here nor there. So let's go ahead and get down to it. So today I'm going to be looking at what many consider the odd duck of the Friday series. And by that I mean it went in a totally different direction than we're used to seeing. This may not be popular opinion, but I find this next movie more of a movie than I do a Friday the 13th movie. What I'm saying is it seems like more like a standard movie that you would see in a theater rather than just a hack and slash thing. You got a little more blending of the genres in here, so it's yeah, it's very cool, man. And anyway, so without further ado, I'm talking about Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. This is the triumphant return of Jason Voorhees as the main killer. We took a brief hiatus with that in Part 5, much of the audience's chagrin, but you know, you can't please everyone. I'm of the opinion I liked what they did with 5 in a way. It's something different. I mean, it doesn't have to be Jason. A lot of times you can just insert, especially in the earlier ones, you can just insert random serial killer in there and it's Jason. As long as he's stomping around the woods, has a mask on, and you know, butchers teens. I mean, what was the huge deal about it? I know there is some intrinsic value of having the Laura character or whatever be the main protagonist, but you know, it tried something different, and I think a lot of people judged it too harshly regarding that. Now, I judged it harshly as a film a lot more than I did as a premise, so I didn't have really a problem with the premise. I thought it was kind of interesting if you get down to it. But in this new iteration, we find that the crowd wanted Jason back, so we gave him Jason, right? So hats off to director Tom McLaughlin here, because you know, I wasn't there. It sounds like he had, well, he wrote this too as well, by the way, this movie, but it sounded like he had a little more carte blanche to work with what he wanted to do in this movie, within budget, of course, than the last director did. So he definitely made it his own baby, and you can definitely see touches of this everywhere. So let's go ahead and get down into it, and I'll go over. I'm trying to keep this a little shorter than my last couple ones, so I have a little less clips here, and hopefully I'll talk a little less, even though I've already talked for almost 5 minutes before even starting the movie. So anyway, let's get down to it, shall we? All right, so the preview kind of says it all, man. This is going to be a different kind of thing. I mean, you have, let's just say, a little bit more of an explosive of a preview. And that kind of just leads into the movie itself. Now, granted, this scene was never actually in the movie, so a little bit different as far as previews go, but I like it. It's real minimalist, no one's talking. It just, you know, it lets the action speak for it. So we start off in probably the coolest set that's ever been done on a Friday the 13th flick, actually. He starts off in this graveyard. Now, granted, it's not a real graveyard, but they make it look really good. You know, it's a big area, so it must have taken a lot of the budget and time and a hell of a lot of art direction, whatever, to get it all just so, because it looks pretty good. I said a lot of wide painting, sweeping shots, and so it kind of gives you a sense of scale. It's a really big set for such a lower budget movie like this. So we find ourselves introduced to another iteration of Tommy. This one's played by Tom Matthews. Unfortunately, and this is probably the biggest wish that I had for this movie, John Shepard couldn't reprise his role, or wouldn't reprise his role as Tommy for this movie, and I think he was excellent in Part 5. I would have loved to see what he would have done with this movie, which is a little more centralized on the Tommy character than the last one. But yeah, so we're met by Tom Matthews and his buddy Horshack, as I always think of him now, coming from the institution. Apparently he's still there in some ways. I'm guessing the last movie screwed him up further. It's kind of left in the air whether he killed, what was her name, Pam or whatever. But anyway, so yeah, they're going out to the graveyard, and obviously Tommy's still having nightmares, and he's having difficulty dealing with Jason in his dreams, so he's going to go out and just destroy the body. So leads up to, I mean, it's kind of a believable premise, right? I mean, it's kind of cathartic to go out and destroy that which is pestering you, right? But there's a lot of good parts in the scene. I'm going to spend a little more time in this scene than I am in a lot of the other bits of this movie because it's so good. I know that Tom McLaughlin really wanted to kind of channel the inner Universal / Hammer horror movies of the 30s and 40s that were so popular, Universal stuff. So there's a lot of lightning strikes and kind of chime music and all that, and lots of uncomfortable pauses on people, which is good. But anyway, so they get out there and they dig Jason up. Another cool thing about this scene is I like the realism here. The casket's pretty far underground, like you would see a real casket. It's not like a foot underground like you see in a lot of movies, So you can imagine him out there digging for a while. So, they dig him up, and then it's a really cool, pretty effective scene here, because he doesn't show a bunch of flashbacks like a lot of the other movies do. He just gets right down to it and plays a little audio in the background and has Tom kind of emote a bit while he's hearing him. But basically Tommy's still having the huge flashbacks from his original encounter with Jason. So I really like this scene here. Actually, the best acted scene that Tom does is here in the beginning. And I love how he just channels his rage as he grabs the nearest implement of destruction and goes to town on Jason.
Oh, shit.
Unfortunately, this little rage episode is what causes the downfall of everybody else in this movie, as we are brought back with tongue-in-cheek style Mr. Voorhees himself via the power of the elements. So there's some good makeup work here too. I like to see the shots of Jason and his maggot and worm infested visage, or whatever you want to call. So the years underground have not been kind to him. One small gripe I have here is that when Tommy's sticking him with the big spike, or the fence rung, whatever you want to call that thing, the body seems pretty dry, and then as soon as he's electrified, he kind of re-moistens, as it were, and he's big and juicy again. But I mean, come on, gotta quit nitpicking somewhat. But so there's a couple effective scenes here, and him jumping out of the grave to grab Tommy is just classic, and you can see poor Hawes just run off in terror, as I think any sane person would probably do. And he's supposed to have mental, difficulties, whatever. But that's not the case. He just hauls ass, and I can't say that blames him. But he redeems himself later. That's to his detriment, actually. But good stuff here. Tommy is obviously overwhelmed because not only is Jason back, but he's a corpse, And there's another good effective scene here where Jason's just standing there staring at him, and the rain's kicking on, and it's knocking all the mag and stuff off of him, and they're just hitting his boots in the ground. Excellent scene there. Love that kind of thing. Like a little attention to detail like that is just, it's just great. So yeah, so Jason's free, and poor Hawes. You get to. It's pretty cool because they set up the very first death to show like how much stronger Jason is now. Like he just rams his hand right through Hawes, and you know his heart's on the other side of him. And there's actually, if you listen really close, there's a soundbite in there of him stepping on the heart later on. Kind of makes a big squish sound. And Hawes goes back in the grave, a little Deus Ex Machina there, whatever. So for later on, but yeah, he's free. So now he's free to go into some interesting credits here. You have Jason. Channeling his inner Bond, and it's kind of a funny thing where they show him in profile, whatever, and he comes in slashes. And you know, when I was younger, I didn't pick up on that until when I got older. Then it kind of hit me like a sledgehammer. It's like, oh yeah, hello. It's just another homage, but just the tongue-in-cheek nature of this movie is off the charts, and this is, you know, just in keeping with that. So next, we're introduced to what I call Devolved Tommy. It's basically him running around talking about Jason for the rest of the movie. So he meets Sheriff Garris, you know, sheriff of this sleepy little town or whatever, in the most inimitable style, just about get himself killed.
Don't shoot, please! You in show business, kid? You sure know how to make an entrance.
Yeah, Tommy's got no chill, man. He's got to learn how to ease himself into situations a little better. I know he's panicked and all, but my gosh, he does not comport himself well. This first meeting of the sheriff, so you know, understandably, Garris, you know, doesn't want anything to do with this guy. Locks him up and is going to deposit him out of town. Unfortunately, Garris's daughter takes an interest in Tommy. I mean, fortunately for the plot, of course, but unfortunately for the sheriff. And we'll get into some more of that later. All right, so next we cut away to kind of see what Jason's up to. So a lot of this movie is him getting back to his familiar territory, Crystal Lake, you know, Camp Blood, whatever you want to call it. I think they call it Forest Green in this movie. So, but he doesn't care about that. He just wants to get back to his old stomping ground. So on his way, he runs afoul of a really kind of a cute couple. This is actually played by Tony Goldwyn and Nancy McLaughlin. You might recognize that last name, and well, you should. But they have really good banter in this. It's for, you know, just for quickie characters who are kind of body count filler. They have some kind of snappy repartee. I like it. I like them a lot. They seem real natural together.
Arrow pointing this way.
I admit nothing without talking to my lawyer. Told you we should have left a trail of breadcrumbs.
Don't start.
So yes, we are introduced to Jason again, a little more stoic, a little more imposing.
Darren, we better turn around.
Why?
Because I've seen enough horror movies to know any weirdo wearing a mask is never friendly.
Jason in this movie is played by C.J. Graham. He brings a very big stature to Jason, and I think he's actually very underrated. You know, everyone always says Kane Hodder is the definitive Jason, but you know, for a guy who does no acting, has done no acting prior to this, CJ does a great job of Jason. He looks menacing. He's got real aggressive kind of movements to him, but he's also really. And he plays a good silent protagonist too. He has all the little, you know, mannerisms that the director wanted him to have. You know, little head tilts and all that. So, like he looks confused, you know, like the lost puppy dog or whatever. Even though he's full of malfeasance, shall we say. But yeah, so Tony makes the mistake of trying to intimidate him with a starting pistol, which looks pretty ridiculous, but whatever. Hey, we're introduced to, you know, kind of Jason's. In the past, Jason might not have, or he would have got out of the way of that gun or tried to get him with stealth. But now Jason, he's like, nothing really gonna hurt him now. So he's been dead for what, 20 years just about now. So I don't think a couple bullets are the least of his problem. So yeah, he quickly dispatches those two. and the body counts are ramping up now. So now we transition back over to the daytime, and we kind of see a little bit of the acting chops of who I think is actually the best actor in this movie, and it's a really small role, but it's actually Bob Larkin playing Groundskeeper Martin. He plays this so well, man. I mean, you could just... It's obviously his dialogue. I don't know how he kept him cracking up sometimes, like, I'm a high school graduate, He plays it off completely deadpan.
Say old Martin ain't a good caretaker. I'm a damn high school graduate. I deserve this job. I earned it.
And of course he breaks the fourth wall in this scene coming up here.
Why'd I have to go and dig up Jason? Some folks have a strange idea of entertainment.
But he brings a lot of life to this character, man. It was great. And apparently he had a little more film time originally with an alternate ending that never got completed. They didn't think it was necessary, and probably wasn't. But yeah, just great work here. So yeah, we get to see we have to spend a little bit of disbelief here as Tommy can no longer show the sheriff because he won't walk 10 feet over to see that the grave has been freshly dug. But not like he would believe him anyway. But anyway, good acting. I like Groundskeeper Martin a lot. Probably my favorite character in the movie. And from here, Jason is still heading his way home through the piney woods of Georgia. Funny, or not really funny, but a fun fact here is I was watching the movie with director's commentary on, and apparently Tom McLaughlin was looking for a burnt-out forest where he's at. I think he was down in Georgia shooting this. And there really wasn't one available. I guess there had been no burns as of recently, so they went out and painted a bunch of those trees and all that to give it that burnout look. So once again, a lot of work to kind of keep things lined up with the director's vision. And I don't think a lot of people would have known or cared that the woods were burnt or not. They're not really looking at the scenery too much in this kind of thing. But this kind of shows you, how much the director wanted to stick to his vision. So kudos to that. But yeah, so we're introduced to more of the cannon fodder here, and once again, a pretty funny segment, where a bunch of corporate execs are out there playing paintball, as people were wont to do back then, as a new trend that it is, kind of a team building exercise. They're all out for themselves, but just funny banter. Let's say this. Okay, I'm gonna get a little off on a tangent here. A lot of the Friday the 13th movies, like the tertiary characters, the counselors, everybody, the protagonists, and sometimes even the protagonist, is bland, blah. They get almost no character development whatsoever. That's not the case in this movie. Everyone is a living, breathing person. You know what I mean? They all have character traits established. Like you have the one nurturing counselor who seems to like the kids quite a bit. You have the sassy one. You have Court. The laissez-faire, hey, I'm just here for the summer job kind of guy, but he's a fun-loving guy too. All the paintballers are, what little time they have, they're actually fleshed out very well. You got the guy who's always hungry and kind of, browbeaten, and the other guy is a little more aggressive and he's getting on his ass about it. But just great. I mean, so it's a funny scene.
Your instinct to eat is stronger than your instinct to win. You're a real ass, you know that? Better than being all ass.
And it actually leads into the first death of the paintballer, or the first paintballer death, should I say. I kind of got that one reversed. It leads to Jason having kind of a funny moment, where he flings the guy so hard that it rips his arm off. And he kind of does the slow raise up, the slow reveal, whatever. And he sees the arm hanging there. And it's cool because the way Jason looks at this arm, it looks like he's surprised at what he's done. Even he doesn't realize how strong he's become or something like that. So, I mean, you don't think of him as a big thinking machine. But yeah, it seems to perplex him a bit. But, there's plenty more scenes. He chews through the rest of the paintballers in pretty short order. That's another interesting scene where Jason kind of seems to jump out of a tree. We didn't only seen that one other time, him jumping down from somewhere, and that was in part 3 when he jumps down from the loft or whatever. So, interesting. It doesn't seem to fit his current slow, shambling, zombie-like motif. He's still walking fairly fast in this, actually, now that I think about it. But it is what it is. All right, so I mentioned earlier about how Tommy could not convince the sheriff that Jason had risen because the grave had been covered by groundskeeper Martin. So this actually leads into one of the other very, very funny sections of the movie, and this also leads into how I talk about how good the editing in this movie was. There's a lot of really clever edits in this movie, and they're not violent, jarring edits. Even the ones where obviously they had to be cut because of MPA, censorship. The cuts are much better in this movie than basically all the other ones. But this one's it's really clever use of editing here, how it transitions from Martin breaking the fourth wall, or not really breaking the fourth wall, but making a little quip to himself, and then picked up by the crowd of kids right directly afterwards.
Dig him up. Does he think I'm a farthead?
Okay, so directly after that, we're nightfall again here. Quick transitions between day and night. And we're met by some more of the kill padding couples here. Basically, I think everything else had been shot at this point, but the execs wanted, I think, 2 or 3 more deaths, I think is what it was. So they decided to off this random couple that was out in the making out in the deep, deep, deep woods for some reason. But 2 things I find kind of cool about this scene. One of them is funny, the other one is just cool. The first part is, if you notice, this movie is, they should call it Friday the 13th Suspenders Live, because everyone has suspenders on this movie. I think, what's her name? Sissy has suspenders underneath her, like, jersey type shirt. Tommy's got suspenders on. Who else has it? There's like 4 characters in the movie with suspenders. And I just noticed on reviewing this movie that the boyfriend, or fiance, I guess you call it, of this cannon fodder here, he's got suspenders on under his rig too. So I'm like, wow. Kind of cool. I mean, I dig suspenders, but I just thought that was kind of funny, man. But it also segues into a cool thing. We've seen that even poor groundskeeper Martin is not safe from the wrath of Jason. So Jason's sitting there defiling the corpse, as you will, with his machete. And, Mr. Amorous himself wanders upon the scene. And one of the few actually kind of heart-pounding moments of the movie is when Jason stops mid-stroke and just kind of whips his body around and he sees the guy. It's like, and he's kind of moonlit in the background. It's a really effective scene, man. Because he didn't say, Jason's silent protagonist, so it works out so well that way. And so he looks like a monster at that point. And you can tell most of the other time it's kind of cartoonish a lot of times when he kills stuff. But this one, night, it's foggy, and just the menace of how he turns his body or whatever and looks at this guy. And he's like, this guy is fish food at that point. So, yeah, this poor couple, they weren't meant to ever see marriage. Another fun fact that will kind of tie in a little bit how I review here. A lot of times in the past, because they were very popular, Friday the 13th movies had a false title attached to them, keep away from piracy and plot leakage and all that. And there was a tradition of naming the titles after David Bowie songs, and this one, I believe the working title was Aladdin Sane. It's an album of Bowie's back in the 70s. A great album, by the way. One of my favorite songs he does, actually, is Aladdin Sane. But it's funny, I also noticed this in the reviewing the third time of this movie, is there's actually an album down in the bottom right area, whatever, and they actually stuck the LP out there of Aladdin Sane. So that was kind of a cool tidbit. There's lots of little things in there, like they'll put, I think like a French existential book in one of the kids' hands or whatever he'd been reading for bed. It was just so odd, little things like that. And he makes all kinds of references to past horror like masters, like Sean, there's like Cunningham Road or whatever it is, and Karloff's General Store, whatever it is, he's down there. But lots of little things like that he put in there. But I just thought it was kind of interesting. And also I mentioned that there's actually kids in this movie. The only Friday the 13th movie has kids in there. But don't fear, they're not harmed. But actually, most of the child actors he uses are pretty good. See, I would like to name all the actors that play every role, but I mean, you see, I have trouble keeping these videos times, down as it is. So, needless to say, they all do a good job. I'm not gonna. There's no one there that I didn't really care for. So now we segue over to see the demise of Court in his paramour, as it were. Interesting scene in the Winnebago, kind of claustrophobic. You know, it's like Jason, you almost wonder, it's like, what would it be like to be trapped in a Winnebago with Jason? So we're about to find out. So Jason executes, which is possibly, and probably more like probably, my favorite kill in the entire series here. Yeah, it was something. And this just goes to show, you know, you don't have to have a lot of gore to make an effective horror movie, you know, to make an effective kill scene. A lot of times it's best to let the imagination do the work for you. But I mean, this one is just, it's obvious how brutal it was, but it's just, I just love the execution, man. It's so awesome. Everything up, the lead up shot of the face coming towards the wall and all that, and then the after effects, just brilliant, I think. And then they have the biggest stunt in the movie here when the Winnebago is sacrificed to the gods of air and fire. So basically at this point, Jason is basically home. So he goes meandering in. Once again, another kind of funny scene where he's walking past the camp rules, you know, like honesty and integrity and all that, and here goes this crazed killer walking through. At this point, Counselor meets her demise in a kind of interesting way. Also, once again, showing how strong he is. This one was censored fairly heavily. It was a little more graphic in the original iteration, but basically she has her head twisted freaking clean off. And once again, Jason looking almost surprised at himself at what he can do.
Guys, try not to wake the kids.
But, you know, it's the kind of the slow build-up of the jump scare and then the kill in there, and it's done pretty effectively. This leads into a lot of back and forth from the counselors, you know, trying to keep the kids calm because they're all having nightmares, or the one girl's having nightmares, and it's a stormy night, so you can imagine, it's their first night away, so you have to imagine they would need a lot of TLC. So, but I really like the scene here where the counselor is telling the little girl to pray away, you know, every time she gets scared of any monsters she sees, and then she stands up and there's Jason there, and he just this little watch right there. It's like,
see you in the morning.
it's perfect, like stalkerish. You know, it's very, that one's a very Halloween moment there, but he is right there in frame. So, and then he does a slow stalk down the thing, but it's just a cool scene. Unfortunately, our nurturer is host to probably the most horrific death, even though it's done completely off screen, which is very effective as well. I do like this huge glut of blood that hits the window. It's pretty effective. So yeah, basically all the counselors are gone at this point, and the kids are on their own. Those poor things. So now the police kind of finally show up. You know, I know I'm skipping through a lot of stuff, but like I said, I'm trying to shorten it up a little bit. And so that gives us new targets for Jason, and including this unlucky guy who actually was the lead stunt director, as I recall, taking one of the many weapons that Jason took off the paintballer in great acrobatic style. Another interesting thing about that scene is this, here's another clever edit, and I didn't really catch this before until I saw the director's commentary. It's he goes right from having that lawn dart or whatever that thing is, you know, into his head, and then it transitions right into a dartboard on the back of the kid's door, the counselor's door, or whatever. So I think this is cool stuff like that, man. It's like, you know, the director didn't have to do all that, but you know, he did, and just the movie's so much better for it. So now we're introduced to Jason as the more mechanical, unstoppable killing machine that he is. He's taking bullets left and right. He's crushing skulls. Yeah, so he doesn't care anymore. I think he realizes in his head now that nothing can stop him, so he just stands there in front of the guns and, hey, unload. As soon as you run out of bullets, you know, you're mine. So, I mean, Garrus even unloads on him with a shotgun, and then you got the basically unkillable monster kind of trope that you have. You know, keeps rising from the dead like the mummy or whatever. So, Yep, Jason's, he's a badass now. So this kind of leads into the scene of Sheriff Garris, played by David Kagan, by the way, and well acted his part. Fun fact, he was also the real-life acting coach of the final girl here, so kudos. But interesting casting that way. But we see him kind of sacrifice himself in order to save the daughters out there screaming her head off. So, cool scene here, man, where someone actually takes it to Jason for once. And he's making pretty good progress until Jason decides to, work the kinks out of him. So once again, we have a bloodless kill here, but it's a brutal one, man. It's basically getting bent in half backwards, snapped. Just awesome. They did some pretty cool work to get that to pull that one off. So yeah, kudos. A lot of that in this movie, so it's definitely appreciated. So now we're treated to the grand finale, and probably the biggest finale as far as like pyrotechnics and all that go of like Friday the 13th movie. And we have Tommy's master plan is to chain Jason to the bottom of the lake with a big rock. All right, return him. We saw earlier that he got some books on the occult and was studying up on how to kill, basically, I guess, the undead. And so that was his plan. So he goes out there in the boat and lures Jason out there, and we're treated to kind of a mashup of horror genres here, as we have like a Jaws meets Creature of the Black Lagoon meets who knows what else, as Jason goes out to meet his old adversary in the water. So. Apparently Tommy didn't think the scene was dramatic enough, so he decided to throw a little fire onto the water too. So it makes for a really cool visual. The lake is on fire while he's waiting for this masked killer to come jump out of the water so he can chain him up. So sounds pretty preposterous, in the cold light of day. But I mean, if you get down to it, it just works, But yeah, cool looking scenery there. So basically struggles ensue. Lots of clever edits here to really give it a living pulse, as it were, of an action sequence. So long story short, Tommy kind of makes good on what he's supposed to do. He gets the chain around Jason, but unfortunately Jason takes him down there with him and throttles the life out of him. And so, and once again, a pretty cool scene. We see Tommy just float up to the bottom. So he's actually dead. He's not playing possum, right? So this is Megan's time to shine, played by Jennifer Cook, by the way. She does really well in this role. I like her a lot better than most other final girls or whatever. She's not technically the only final girl because Tommy's still around or whatever, but just a lot less screaming, and she's a much better help throughout the movie than most of them are.
Come on, Hot, let's go. You drive, I'll navigate.
But she goes in to save the day, and she drags Tommy out, and unfortunately, in helping Tommy, she leaves herself open to Jason's unwanted grasping, as it were. So yeah, he pulls her down too, and so there's a lot of back and forth tug of war, almost, as she's fighting to stay above the surface, and he's trying to pull her down with him. And so she makes her way to the boat, and eventually hits Jason with the most unique implement that's ever been devised, that's for sure. There's a lot of interesting things about the scene, but I'll leave you for watching that in like director's cuts and all that. But let's just say that yeah, it's quite the stirring, as it were, attack against Jason. And it allows her to break free and drag Tommy ashore and to breathe life into his lifeless body. And so we're kind of treated to another really cool, bit of not so much film allegory, but just a subtle way of showing what the director's trying to convey. Like, you still see the burning ship wreckage out there. You think it all was sank by now. There's still some flickers of light going on out there, and then the fire stops as everyone's looking at it. So it's like, okay, that's the director's way of saying Jason's done. He's neutralized at this point. So and they could have ended it right there if they really wanted to. Been pretty effective, but they actually go into another scene where it kind of shows Jason, hey, he's still stuck down there, but he's alive and well. He's just waiting at this point. He doesn't need to breathe, obviously, anymore, so he's still down there waiting for the next person to swim a little too close. So there you go. There you have Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. And let's talk about some quick pros and cons. I'll start with the cons because there's not very many of them at all. In a way, this sometimes doesn't feel like a Friday the 13th movie. Like, there's not much of a scare factor here, as opposed to, basically Parts 4. That one really amped up the pressure a lot. Mostly because Jason can move fast. That was a lot of it. But there was also the loss of pressure against Jason because he seems pretty much indestructible at this point. So there's not really any, he's going to win basically any confrontation that he has with anybody. So while I think zombie Jason's probably more popular than human Jason to a lot of the fanboys or whatever, it has its pluses and minuses. So for the minus part, it takes away a lot of tension when in dealings with him, because he's able to at least hurt him in a way to help make your escape, but now that's not really possible anymore. Some people probably wouldn't like the comedy additions, but you know what? A lot of the previous ones have tried to insert really bad comedy in there, so why not actually have good comedy thrown in there? It may take away a little bit from the seriousness of the movie, but once again, this is the director trying something different. It's like he wanted to build some levity into the movie, and he, for the most part, did it effectively. So it was mostly done tastefully. I know the one rule he was given was he can never poke fun at Jason. Jason had a few self-aware moments that could be considered humorous, like when he lifts the friggin' arm up or whatever that he just ripped off. But I mean, so it's not overly done, and it goes away at the end pretty much, except for a couple of comedic highlights with the kids. Them pretty cute scenes there. Once again, the child actors are really good in this. They do a good job with what little they're given for screen time. But so I mean, of course, it's really tame kills. Once again, I don't care too much about. I'm not a gore fiend, so I don't care about buckets of blood splashing around and all that. But yeah, even for Friday the 13th, a lot of these are pretty tame. Once again, as I always say, Jason's greatest nemesis is the MPAA. Back then, they had a hard-on for just cutting these movies like you wouldn't believe. So, but yeah, you have to get a rated R rating so you can actually get an audience to see it. So, unfortunately, cuts had to be made. I think there was even some talk of making this a PG-13 movie for a little while. But then it's like, we don't need a rated R movie. We can't have a Friday the 13th movie. It's PG-13 or whatever. So. But there's no nudity in this movie, which is also a different, or it's like basically a takeaway from every other Friday the 13th, because they all had at least a little bit of nudity in them. So, yep, so bloodshed's at a minimum, and not the world's most creative deaths in the world, but that's all right. So I think that pales in comparison to the pros of this movie. So let's talk about some pros here. Outside of, and I hate to say this, outside of Tom Matthews, I think the rest of the cast is excellent. They all just seem really natural in their roles. They seem to have camaraderie. The counselors seem to have camaraderie with each other. The police seem to have camaraderie with each other. And there's actually decent chemistry between Tommy and Megan, too. So it's not like Tom Matthews did a bad job. I just didn't like... It might have been somewhat how he was written, you have to keep on and on about Jason. But maybe that kind of fits into his, his psychosis or whatever. He's going to become fixated on Jason, and now it's even worse since he kind of brought him back from the dead. So I don't know. I'm probably, because I like John Shepard's portrayal so much, that I'm kind of disappointed that he wasn't able to reprise his role. I tried to hold that against Tom Matthews. So he does a serviceable job. I'm not saying anything bad about it, just that, like, I just didn't find him as likable as I did most of the other cast. So, but yeah, the acting is really strong throughout. From Jason on down, everyone seems portrayed pretty well. You got the ridiculously over-top deputy. You have the hard-nosed but fair sheriff. It's good. The counselors tend to seem like someone who'd be a camp counselor this time. Cinematography is great. Steve Miner is the only director of the series, I think, who does camera work as well. There's a lot of like slow panning shots in this movie. He does a lot of crane work too. There's a really cool shot where I think Megan found Sissy's head or whatever in the car, and then the crane or boom, whatever, just raises up, and you see the kind of she's still sitting there kind of freaking out in the middle of all these cars. It's just a really cool shot. And once again, for just a standard slasher movie, you wouldn't have to go through all that trouble. But Tom McLaughlin sets up shots well. His director of photography did really well with the scenes, and everything looked right too. All the set design looked right too as well. So kudos on that. So it's shot very, very well looking. Harry Manfredini was once again doing the sound, and this time I loved what he does with it. He gets away from more of the psycho strings, and they're still there, but they're not nearly as prevalent as they are in the other movies, and I think that's a strength in this movie. The sound it's interesting. He also does some really crazy sound effects. Like there's a scene where Jason kind of appears, where was it? I think Karen Noonan or whatever is taking the kid outside to go back to bed, and then the camera kind of pans and Jason in frame there. It just makes the craziest sound it's basically ever heard in the Friday the 13th movie. It's a wacky sound effect, but there's lots of cool stuff like that in there. So a lot of good work. Another good sound effect, I like the coffin opening sound. It's just great. But so sound is good. Everything else is pretty solid. Lighting, like I said, music. They even threw a car chase in there, something else that hadn't been done in the Friday the 13th movie before or since. So, and the movie, the pacing is perfect. It just flows. This reminds me of like part 2, but a little less jarring than part 2. I mean, every scene kind of makes sense in the grand scheme, and it just moves from point A to point B at a brisk pace, but a fairly logical one. It takes Jason a little time to get back home. I'm not sure how far away the cemetery was from Camp Crystal Lake, but so the pacing just works. Nothing feels too rushed, and outside of a couple edits that were made obviously to satisfy the MPA, I mean, I don't know, it just all blends together very, very well. So we're just looking at a well-made movie. So anyway, I've rambled on long enough. Let's get down to the meat and potatoes here. Do I think Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, was a good movie? Was it good? The movie was great. While there are some small bits that don't feel like a Friday movie, some of the excess humor and some of the breaking the fourth wall stuff, most of it just works, and it's a cool new direction that the movie took. I'm going to go ahead and give this 4 out of 5 stars. It's pretty hard for me to give any movie a 5-star because there's a couple things I wasn't crazy about, but I won't let that detract from the overall score. Yes, it did feel different, but maybe that's a good thing. It's getting a little stale at that point. 1 through 5 is just basically a long succession of the same thing happening. So I really applaud Tom McLaughlin for taking things in a different direction. Definitely the most competently directed of all of them, right there with Steve Miner's stuff. So those two are just great directors, I think. And it's too bad they couldn't man all of them, honestly, because they would have a much better product for some of the other stuff. So it's well acted. A lot of choreography going on there. Actually some pretty decent action. Good laughs that don't seem forced. It's just here's what I was saying, alluding to the very beginning of the review, is this is not just a Friday the 13th movie. It's just a good movie in general. Take Jason out of this and replace him with any other monster or whatever and still a good movie. And they just threw a lot more lore in there, being Friday the 13th had been around for a little while. So, yeah, 4 out of 5 stars. I think the movie's great. A lot of Friday fans are kind of torn between it. Mostly, I think, because of the humor and the breaking the fourth wall. And then some people don't like the fact that Jason got turned into Super Jason. But that's natural. I mean, he's been dead for a while. You got to do something with him that's different. So, anyway, yeah, highly recommend watching this movie. Not only if you're a Friday movie aficionado, but if you're just a aficionado of, like, horror movie like tributes. This is basically one long tribute movie for all intents and purposes, to the old classic horror movies of old. So yeah, highly recommended. Go give it a check out. I can definitely appreciate it more now as an adult than I did when I was younger, because I was more interested in just seeing body count and nudity and whatever it is else that I wanted as a young man to see. So, but yeah, just a well-made movie, and I really like the direction they went with it. So unfortunately, it was just a one-time thing, but I think parts of it, actually, this movie was actually fairly, like, I hate to use the term, but inspirational to some other directors. Like, I know Scream was, the big, huge hit that it was heavily influenced by this movie. So it's kind of a self-deprecating manner and its self-awareness. So it just shows you kind of the power it had in the genre. Plus, there's a lot of... or a pretty good soundtrack here too. And Alice Cooper actually wrote at least one song for this movie. I'm not sure if he wrote 2, but 3 Alice Cooper songs are used within, and one of them is just the entirety of the post movie credits. So if you want to listen to Alice Cooper belt out a hair metal song, by all means, please peruse the credits. It's good to see people who were actually involved in the movie making anyway. So anyway, I'll go ahead and wrap it up for now. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay tuned for more movies in my review of a series of the hack and or slash genre. Next, I'll be looking at Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. So getting back to what was my favorite one back when I was younger, and since I haven't seen it since the 80s, I'm curious to find if it's still my favorite. I have a suspicion that it won't be, but we'll just only one way to find out. So once again, stay tuned for more content coming up in the near future. All right, until next time, this is Genome, just slogging his way through Friday the 13th and loving it. Out.